Welcome to Fantasy Football Today Dynasty. I am your host, Heath Cummings, and boy, do we have a great show for you today. We've got Adam Azer, we've got Jamie Eisenberg, we've got free agent and trade news and the Dynasty impact. And listen, I've got an award-winning podcast host here with me, and he knows that sometimes you make a plan for a show and then you get breaking news at the last minute. And you've got to start with the breaking news. And obviously, we had breaking news this morning. Daniel Jones is an Indianapolis Colts. Thomas can't have him on the Vikings. Adam can't have him back on the Giants. Jones, $14 million to compete with Anthony Richardson for the starting job. Adam, no one's defended Daniel Jones as much as you. No one's doubted Anthony Richardson as much as you. Who wins this competition?
Anthony Richardson will win it. I think he will be the starter in week 1. If they could pull him for Daniel Jones, this is not one of those situations where I'm rushing to pick up Josh Downs after Richardson gets pulled, because I don't think I'm starting a Colts wide receiver until Richardson's out. But this is not as good as having, Joe Flacco as the backup. So this is a bad situation. But I'll say Richardson is the starter and Daniel Jones. I've been watching a lot of tape of quarterbacks, Sam Darnold and Aaron Rodgers today, Russell Wilson, and those guys at least have the capability of like throwing a guy open. And I just never see Daniel Jones do that. I watched Aaron Rodgers make a back shoulder throw to Davante Adams about a half hour ago, and it's just so rare to see Daniel Jones do something like that. He is just a quarterback who cannot process, and I don't even think he can beat out Anthony Richardson.
So that was awfully negative, Jamie. But if you had Daniel Jones on your Superflex roster, like, this is about as good as it gets. You must hold him through the offseason now on the chance that he could win this battle.
I think if the reports are accurate and the two teams he was deciding between were to stay in Minnesota or go to Indianapolis, then he had a win-win situation either way for his long-term or his short-term fantasy appeal, because this is probably a one-year situation unless he obviously blows the doors off the Colts offense and looks fantastic. But yes, he was going to back up most likely, two shaky quarterbacks, or quarterback situations. McCarthy, not having a resume yet, and Richardson's resume being very incomplete. So he went to a situation where I hope, and I'm glad Adam brought up the name Sam Darnold. I hope that, he went through the Kevin O'Connell car wash and he learned a little bit more about the position and understands a little bit more about the position. It can translate some of those things in the time that he spent in Minnesota to whatever action he gets in Indianapolis. And so it would not be a surprise if he's the starter from week 1 on, because Richardson has a shaky preseason. I agree with Adam. I still think Richardson's going to be the starter there, because if you're giving up on him now, it really, is not necessarily a setback to the franchise, but it's a setback to the franchise, to invest in a high draft pick on a quarterback like this and then to give up on him, 3 years in. Richardson, as we know, spent some time this offseason working with a quarterback guru, and hopefully that, pans out and he looks better throwing the ball. But I mean, these are two guys that have a lot to prove. And so it's going to be fun to see how this all plays itself out. I will disagree with Adam on the Josh Down things. The one thing we know that Daniel Jones did was throw to a slot receiver and have some success with that. So, that might help him a little bit.
Not really.
Well, he did.
Sterling Shepard, are you kidding me?
Shepard was good. Wan'Dale Robinson
looking pretty modest because Sterling Shepard was the number 1 receiver on the team. I think Michael Pittman's still there, right? Like this, I don't know. You're going to need a lot more. Could he be like Wan'Dale Robinson and catch 6 passes and whatever and PPR his way into being start worthy? Sure, it's not going to elevate him to. At times, he was a damn good fantasy option, Josh Downs.
They don't have Joe Flacco. We can agree
I would
on that.
much rather have Flacco. If I had a wide receiver, I'd much rather have Flacco throwing to him than either Jones or Richardson.
Yes, this signing is not necessarily making things better for Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, and I don't know about Alec Pierce, because I think Richardson's probably good for Alec Pierce, just the things that he does. But in any event, yes, this is not the best thing for the receivers, and it will be fun to watch these guys compete for the starting job.
Later on the show today, we are going to talk about Justin Fields, Sam Darnold, Geno Smith, Najee Harris, Javonte Williams, DK Metcalf, Davante Adams, and more. On Friday, I have Davis Maddock coming on. We'll talk about whatever happens the rest of this week and the guys who stayed on their teams, at least so far, in the case of T. Higgins. But we always start with 3 questions for our guests, and the first one can be a quick one. Who is going to be the starting quarterback for the New York Giants in 2025, Adam?
Me. Cam Ward. It might as well be me. No, I think it'll be Cam Ward. I think they're going to get desperate and trade up and get Cam Ward.
Jamie?
Ward or Shadur Sanders.
Ward or Shadur Sanders. Okay. No vet going to start for the Giants. I kind of hope that's the case. As of today, Jamie, what are your top 3 landing spots for a rookie running back?
Chicago Bears, 1. Las Vegas Raiders, 2. And Pittsburgh Steelers, 3.
Ooh. Do you agree with those 3, Adam? And did the answer change yesterday because Najee Harris went to the Chargers?
Yeah. I think Swift is too good for a rookie running back unless it's Genty to just come in and take the job and it just relegate Swift to the bench. So I was looking for an opportunity to be a 3-down back. I have Denver 1. I know they use a lot of running backs, but those guys all stink. And they actually have one of the best offensive lines in football. PFF have them as the second best offensive line in 2024 behind Philadelphia. ESPN pass block and run block win rate very high. I think number 1 maybe for both of them, for Denver, for both of those categories. I have the Raiders on there. I think I like what they did. Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly. It just sort of reminds me of Greg Roman and John Harbaugh, Jim Harbaugh, sorry. Just like they're going to be better, competent, and it would be a good spot for a running back. So I do agree with Las Vegas. I still have Dallas on there. I don't take Javonte Williams too seriously. 1 year, $3 million contract. So I think Javonte could be a 3rd down back because he's been a very good pass blocker, but I think it's pretty easy to come in and beat him out as a running back. So I go Denver, Raiders, Dallas.
And finally, the third question. We've had a couple of second-year players who were, I think, free agent losers so far. Ben Sinnott because Zach Ertz stayed there. Jalen McMillan because Chris Godwin stayed there. What type of rookie pick, Adam, would you give up for Jalen McMillan or Zach Ertz?
I had 2 second-round picks before I made the Jaden Daniels trade in our Dynasty League. I would not have given up 2.3 for Jaden Daniels or Ben Sinnott.
I would give up 2.3 for Jaden Daniels.
For Jalen McMillan or Ben Sinnott. But 211 I have, and I would consider that. I think mid to late second round pick is where we start talking about those guys.
Jamie, I was thinking not a top 18 pick, so not the first half of round 2, but somewhere in the second half of round 2 for both those guys. Does that sound about right?
I would give up a mid second round pick for Jalen McMillan, maybe even early second round pick for McMillan, depending on the situation of my team. Because if you're picking early in the second round, you're probably a rebuilding roster. Sinnott could be a little bit tougher just because if they're doing this, they're kind of telling us that they don't trust him yet. And if they don't trust him now, are they going to trust him in year 3 of what could be a 2-year window of being the Commanders tight end? And then he's maybe chasing another roster. And hopefully it's not another Michael Mayer situation of a talented player that doesn't get an opportunity because he may or may not be ready. So I would not probably give up a second round pick. It'd probably be a 3rd round pick at best for Ben Sinnott. And I
think the optimistic case on Ben Sinnott is that Zach Ertz is going to play the first 7 games of the year and then get hurt. And he just follows the Trey McBride path perfectly because McBride had Ertz come back for year 2 and then Ertz got hurt. But listen, Ertz was, I wouldn't want to say he was really good last year, but he was really serviceable. And I think a real help as a security blanket to Jaden Daniels. So I understand why they brought him back. Let's take our first break. When we come back, we'll talk about the free agent and traded quarterbacks.
Yeah, we always find our way back home.
So I put these guys in order by position of how I currently have them ranked in Dynasty now. Justin Fields, one of the biggest movers in my Dynasty rankings, because going into the offseason, I really didn't know if he'd get a starting opportunity this year. And now it feels like not only does he get to compete, but he probably is the week 1 starter for the New York Jets. Jamie, he moved from QB 25 up to QB 16 in my Dynasty rankings. Best case scenario, how much higher does Justin Fields go in the Dynasty rankings this season?
It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, he's still young enough that he could be a top 12 quarterback. If he, takes hold of the new system for the Jets and can turn Garrett Wilson into what he had with DJ Moore, at least to give himself the opportunity to prove that he can throw the ball and develop a good rapport with a guy that he knows. I mean, this was a receiver that he played with 2 years in college. in terms of Wilson. He's going to have a run game to support him in Breece Hall, and hopefully they continue to build out the offensive line for the Jets. But, I mean, what this guy does with his legs, I don't think people really understand. He's one of 3 quarterbacks in NFL history with 1,000 yards on his resume. Like, that's Lamar Jackson, Michael Vick, and Justin Fields. He ran for 1,143 yards in 2022. And so he's been a very good fantasy quarterback. Forget about what you think of him as an NFL quarterback, and let's give him some respect. The Steelers were 4-2 last year in the 6 games that he started. So he can win if needed and plays a ball control offense. And as we saw in the final 4 games as a starter last year, he was averaging over 24 fantasy points per game. That's amazing. So, yes, this is a great situation for him to just be a starter. And so hopefully the environment around him is successful enough that he's not asked to have to go out and win games in the fourth quarter. He's not that type of guy. He's not going to be we're down 17 points, 14 points, go win us a game consistently. He'll do it every now and then, obviously, but he's not going to do it consistently. So if they're in situations where they're competitive, which is hard to expect his first year there, I just think this is a good opportunity for him with some nice pieces around him, get another receiver, hopefully a tight end, some easy throws, and we could see Justin Fields 20 plus per game consistently, which is what he's done every time he's been a starting quarterback.
Adam, I want to talk about the guys who are just above him in the rankings, and how realistic do you think it is that if Justin Fields does well, he could pass these guys during the season in terms of dynasty value? A lot of them, most of them, in fact, are younger than Fields, who will be 26 at the start of this season. Still very, very young for a quarterback. But CJ Stroud, could you see Justin Fields ahead of CJ Stroud in dynasty rankings at some point in this calendar year?
Can I just say you're probably asking the wrong person, because I just don't believe in Fields' dynasty value, because I don't think he's a winning starting quarterback. I think he's always going to be a borderline must-start quarterback in fantasy when he's the starter. But I don't think he's a good enough passer, and I don't think he's going to be a starter for the rest of his career. I think he's going to bounce around. So no, I don't think he'll get ahead of CJ Stroud.
Anthony Richardson.
Yes, 100%.
Drake May.
No chance.
Bo Nix.
No.
Kyler Murray.
No.
Brock Purdy.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you think like 16 is just as about it. And the funny, I use the guys ahead of him because
behind,
like, I'm ranking Justin Fields alongside 32-year-old quarterbacks who are definitely going to start this year and next year, but don't have near as much upside. I think it's better probably to compare him to those younger guys who most of those guys haven't delivered the fantasy production that Fields has.
Yeah.
Whereas it's with the older guys, it's probably more about like, are you contending right now, or are you looking for long-term upside?
Yeah. And so he's going to a Jets team that doesn't have a good offensive line, that's done nothing to address that so far, that lost Morgan Moses, that has one good wide receiver. So, and they have the 7th pick, I think, 8th pick, something like that. So like they can address it. It's not necessarily a great situation. I don't know that he's set up for success. I hope they're going to have they will have a more creative offense, but and then Tyrod Taylor's a decent backup. So I could see him losing his job. I'm not super bullish. I'm not making a dynasty trade of anything more than a mid to late second round pick on Justin Fields. It's probably worth the gamble.
In Superflex?
Yeah, I should go higher than that. Early second round pick. I would not give up a first round pick for Justin Fields, but I'd give up an early second round pick for him. It's worth the gamble because he's so valuable. But I still think there's a possibility that he's, is like a 6-week starter, and then we're talking about him on a new team next year.
So I'm going to stay with you because one of the guys he passed in the rankings was Sam Darnold, who actually falls from 22 to 23, mostly because Justin Fields passed him. But I'm just not very excited about Sam Darnold on the Seahawks. And I know that you are the biggest Sam Darnold fan. So give me the optimistic case for Sam Darnold.
I don't know why people think I'm the biggest Sam Darnold fan. Yeah, look, I probably watched like 140 dropbacks of Darnold yesterday, and I cannot take away this fact. He made some great throws last year. Not just like he threw it to a lot of open receivers, and he benefited from Minnesota, and he's going to a coordinator that, Clint Kubiak, who has history with him and came from San Francisco and did some decent things in New Orleans, but whatever. Like, there's a chance that he's going to benefit from just not being on the Jets. He's a good deep ball thrower, I think. That's pretty much all I got for Darnold. Like, he might rush for 250 yards. That's not bad. I like no interest. I'm not super excited about him. I do think that in a dynasty league, I like where you have him. You know, he could be a low end super flex guy, but I don't like this situation at all. This team wants to run it. They have one wide receiver who's a slot wide receiver. I don't like that. And they haven't addressed their offensive lines as far as I know. So, oh no, they got somebody, but they got like a swing tackle. So, and that was a big issue for them. They signed Josh Jones, who's been a backup in his career on their offensive line. Yeah, so I don't know why you want me to make the optimistic case. Optimistic case is low end super flex number 2 quarterback.
Jamie, this feels like if I'm in a super flex league, this is a really good opportunity to say, hey, look, Sam Darnold's going to be a starting quarterback for at least the next 2 years. Who wants to trade for him?
I would agree. I mean, you know, like I'll give you 2 examples in 2 dynasty leagues that I have where one we're in together where my quarterbacks are Anthony Richardson and Justin Herbert, and that's it. You know, so if I can get Darnold cheap, I would obviously try to do so just to have a third quarterback. And then in another one where I have Geno Smith, Matthew Stafford, and JJ McCarthy. And so, you know, again, if I can get a guy like Darnold cheap, I would try to do so. So the commitment is there financially for him to be the starter for this year, and then they could, you know, kind of get out of it, I think, if they need to past this. My guess is they're not looking at Darnold to come in and be an MVP. I think they would love it if he does, but I don't think that's the expectation. I think the idea is for him to be a little bit better than Geno Smith, win some games, don't turn the ball over, and, you know, hopefully build off the success that he's had, which is why he's getting paid what he is. And, you know, he said he took less money because he wants to give the Seahawks a chance to build around him. I don't know how much I believe that, you know, if this was the market for him. It's a good contract. It's not an overpay. And I think the Seahawks did something, you know, smart, because if Geno Smith was asking for $40 million a year, you get, you know, Sam Darnold $10 million less. I'd make that move too, especially since he's 4 years younger. So, you know, Adam mentioned it, you know, the Minnesota car wash, the San Francisco car wash, you know, he spent the last 2 years in some good systems. So hopefully learning from, you know, Kyle Shanahan and Kevin O'Connell, and Adam said, you know, Kubiak was on that 49er staff when they were there, that they can do some good things. It's just a team you got to see build out a little bit more, and hopefully allow him to have good weapons, because the thing that I think made him so successful in Minnesota was great weapons, and, you know, on top of a great play caller. And so if he can have some things, you know, around him that'll help, then it'll be interesting. So I think you have him ranked appropriately. You know, I think in the 20s, you know, low 20s makes some sense. We'll see if, you know, you have Cam Ward ahead of him or Shedeur Sanders ahead of him, you know, depending on their destinations. And maybe, you know, a Jackson Dart or somebody else that, you know, gets an opportunity to potentially start. But Darnold's not exactly somebody I think you should be overpaying for. I do agree with you if you have him on your team, because he's probably may have been starting for you last year, but probably was your third quarterback going into the season, or even fourth quarterback. You should absolutely be shopping him to a team like mine that could use some quarterback help, and hopefully you can work out some sort of fair compensation.
Adam puts in the private chat, I just made a Darnold trade offer. I am really like, I almost don't want to expose you for how bad this offer probably is.
What do you think it is?
But I'm going to go ahead and let you say,
No.
what do you offer? 211 and a 2026 second.
I only offered 211.
That's an awful trade offer.
Well, this guy doesn't need him. He's got like Burrow and another.
He probably doesn't need whoever's going to go at 211 either. Jamie, the guy he replaced was Geno Smith, and he's just kind of stayed at QB 28 for me. I don't know that I know that there's a real difference between Darnold and Geno Smith. I'm not sure. I think Seattle saved money. I'm not sure they upgraded, but it feels like the situation for Geno, at least right now, is definitely a downgrade. You go from DK and JSN to Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers. He's 34 years old. If they sign him to an extension, then maybe he moves up a little bit in the rankings, but I'm not sure that I really view Geno as a top 25 quarterback in Dynasty.
Yeah, the only thing I might disagree with you, though, is the situation, because if you just look at it, he was losing Metcalf and he was losing Lockett. So if he had stayed in Seattle, this was going to be the same type of setup for him no matter what. And so I think to go to Chip Kelly, to leave what was going to be the system in Seattle, to go to Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers and maybe another, you know, receiving threat if they decide to pull the trigger early in the draft, or, you know, maybe take a wide receiver around 2. I don't know all their draft picks, but I think the system is probably better. The offensive line is definitely better. Playing indoors, I think, is going to be better, and maybe with some shootouts, given the fact that he's got to play the Chiefs twice, although they don't really have shootouts anymore. But, the Broncos game could be, high scoring. Certainly Chargers game could be high scoring. If those teams decide to, allow their quarterbacks to throw, we could see that happening. But in any event, I think Geno will give you some production with his legs. Yes, the age is clearly the biggest concern. And look, they may still draft a quarterback, if they decide, okay, we didn't trade for Geno to be our long-term guy. We traded for Geno to be our short-term guy and a bridge quarterback to the rookie. So you may, see an extension and then see a draft pick, so he may go up in your rankings and then down in your rankings, in a matter of 2 months. But I do think that from what he was leaving 2024, not the best situation. What he was leaving right now, Seattle to the Raiders, I do think is an upgrade for him. So if I'm in a short-term, so like, again, compare Darnold and Geno Smith. If I'm looking at, okay, I need somebody for 2025, I'd rather have Geno Smith. If I need somebody for the next 3 years, then obviously I'm taking a chance on Darnold because of age.
We had a question from the chat from Wednesday. It says Sam will be working next year. Fields? And that leads to the next question, Adam. Rank Fields, Darnold, and Geno Smith, not on the likelihood they're starting next year, but in 2027.
2027?
2027. So Geno will be 36 years old. Darnold will be in the third year of his 3-year deal that's not guaranteed. And Fields will be 29. It'll basically be, has he been good enough?
Fields is going to be last. 2027. I'm going to say Geno Smith, Sam Darnold, Justin Fields.
You agree with that order, Jamie?
No. I would say Fields 1, Darnold 2, Geno. I think Geno could be out of the league by then just because of his age. It wouldn't surprise me, though, if Darnold and Fields are backups. But I'll just play the age percentage.
Yeah, I think, and even the idea that Darnold's definitely going to be starting next year. No, if he completely regresses, they'll just eat that. We've seen teams eating big contracts here recently. If he's not good at all, then he probably won't be starting for all of next year. Let's move over to the running backs. Not quite as exciting, but Najee Harris going to the Chargers is a positive development for him. I think you have to be really careful with any running back who signs in free agency, because we've seen this happen before. A team signs them, we think, oh, they're the starter, and then they draft somebody in round 2, and that guy's actually better. But Najee gets a 1-year deal with the Chargers, moves up from RB 32 to RB 27 in my running back rankings. Jamie, does he become like a real contender trade target if the Chargers don't add another significant running back?
Absolutely. I mean, they made J.K. Dobbins great again. Clearly Dobbins more explosive. The one thing about Najee, and I think this plays into, a team like the Chargers, I thought the Raiders would have made some sense also in trying to get him, just in terms of looking at the coaches. He does not miss games and he does not fumble. And so while you don't have the explosiveness, because we certainly have seen that, Adam harps on this constantly about his lack of 30-yard runs or 36-yard runs, whatever.
He's never had a 40-yard run in his career. He has the second most carries in football in that span. He does not have a single 40-yard run.
He is the only running back, and probably in a short list of players, that if you're looking on our YouTube right now, has played 68 games over the last 4 years and not missed a game. And he's got 3 fumbles on his career, on his resume. I don't know about playoffs, but 3 fumbles in the regular season. So that's appealing to a coach. And then you start to dissect it a little bit. Okay, he's got 4 seasons of 1,000 yards rushing. He's got 4 seasons of at least 6 receptions. And he's got 3 seasons of at least 36 catches. And so he showed us as a rookie, he could certainly be a good pass catcher when given that opportunity. But again, what are you looking for out of your backfield? So if you're looking for a home run hitter, he's not that guy. If you're looking for a guy that's going to, put his nose down and hopefully get you a couple yards, when you need it, then I think he's certainly suitable. And by the end of the season, his numbers will look somewhat okay, just not exactly, league winning for fantasy or probably difference making for an NFL roster. So how much do they invest in this backfield? Well, they have, Hassan Haskins, who's got a tie to Harbaugh from Michigan. They have Kamani Vidal, who we didn't get to see much of last year. But they showed us last year what they wanted. They wanted guys that they knew, in terms of Dobbins and Edwards. They wanted a plotter in Edwards who, didn't necessarily do what he did in Baltimore. Who knows how much of that was because of the knee injury that he sustained, prior to coming to the Chargers. I think it's a good fit, and so I don't know if it's a day 2 running back. I think we could see maybe a day 3 guy, guy number 10, 11, 12 in the class going to this team, and another Kamani Vidal type of guy. But in any event, I think it's a huge win for Najee to go to this team. He was going to be the one guy, for me at least, because Aaron Jones in his 30s, I'm trying to think of all the guys in the class. Javonte Williams, not inspiring. Where was he going to end up?
Right.
Dallas, Cleveland, Chargers, Broncos, like Raiders. Like, he's going to be the one that I think is going to, sort of have an opportunity here, and I like it for him. So I think you have him ranked appropriately because the 1-year deal, and he's entering the age, 27 years old, of not exactly a lot of life left, especially with all the miles on his body. But for a short-term window, like if you're a competing dynasty team, like this is the type of guy you go get that can get you through a season as a number 2 running back.
Adam, I'm not sure I've ever seen a more consistent Pro Football Reference player page.
Yeah.
Between 1,034 and 1,043 rushing yards each of the last 3 years. Between 15 and 16 rush attempts each of the last 3 years. Between 1.7 and 2.4 catches per game each of the last 3 years. We just know, like, he's going to get 15 carries a game. He's going to catch 2 passes a game. He's going to be a borderline RB2. He is who he is.
He is who he is, I think, with 2. Let me give you an upside and a downside. Downside is you look at the last 4 games, I think, of last 5 games, including the playoffs. He didn't have more than 13 carries in any of those games. They were all losses. 3 of them were by more than 14 points. Actually, include the postseason, 4 of them were like blowout losses. So Jalen Warren was almost as involved, not more involved, than Najee Harris down the stretch. And I think they might have gotten a little bit tired of him, but also he is a little game script dependent. So the split that I look at is wins versus losses. It's pretty unbelievable. In his career, Najee Harris has averaged 75 rushing yards per game in wins and 46.5 rushing yards per game in losses. He gets game scripted out, especially after his rookie year where he had 73 catches. Like, he doesn't play on third down anymore. I think the Chargers present an opportunity to be a pretty damn good team this year, right? I could see them flirting with 11, 12 wins. I could see him scoring more touchdowns finally because he needs to score. Like, he's just not an explosive player. But that's the best case scenario for him, is that the Chargers do better, use him a little bit more, and he scores more touchdowns. That would be the upside.
The second biggest running back signing, I guess, so far, although I think Elijah Mitchell maybe got more money, Javonte Williams to the Cowboys. I am definitely more skeptical, Adam, that Javonte Williams is going to be the starting running back for the Cowboys than I am Najee Harris is going to be for the Chargers. But he does move up a little bit from RB37 to RB35. Do you think, like, they did just go through a year where they decided they were fine with Rico Dowdle as their starting running back? Is there a chance that they just are cheap at this position now and Javonte is the starter?
Man, I would just bring back Rico Dowdle at this point. I don't know what Javonte Williams does well anymore. ESPN had a stat, if I could find it here, that it was they cited next gen stats. And what I think it was is he had the slowest top speed of any running back in football with more than a certain amount of carries, like getting to the line of scrimmage. So you could look at that as like he was basically the slowest accelerator in the NFL at running back. He hasn't had a carry longer than 21 yards in his last 3 seasons. That includes an injury shortened one. So the knee injury just destroyed Javonte Williams. It wasn't just an ACL. It was a multiple ligament injury. He just has not been good, not been explosive at all. I don't know what he's good at, but pass blocking is one thing that he is good at. So I wonder if they brought him in, honestly, to be a third down back. Kind of like maybe what Cincinnati could have done with Zach Moss, because Zach Moss was a great pass protector. They could have just made Chase Brown the running downs back, and Moss could have been the passing downs back, but they didn't do that. They should have. I agree. I don't think he's a starting running back for them. I'm not taking this all that seriously, but if they are cheap with it, Rico Dowdle was really good. Weeks 12 through 18, he was the number 18 running back per game, and he averaged 4.8 yards per carry. Javonte could get that kind of work. I don't think he gets that yards per carry, but maybe he gets like 4.1, 4.2 and be usable.
Jamie, I mentioned Elijah Mitchell to the Chiefs. I think he's probably more of a contingency plan of if Isaiah Pacheco doesn't ever regain his explosiveness. He did move way up in the rankings from RB 135 to RB 97, but I think he's probably on the waiver wire in a lot of dynasty leagues. That like over what happened over the last year, especially if he didn't have enough IR spots, Mitchell was the kind of guy who would get dropped. Are you making an effort at least if he's available to go pick him up?
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy that's assuming the hamstring is okay. You don't see hamstring surgery knocking somebody out for a full season. The 49ers had the luxury of having so many backup running backs that they probably felt that they didn't need him, or it was really just that bad. But this is a guy that's missed a lot of time, so there's a bad injury track record here for him. And since his rookie season, when he replaced Raheem Mostert after the first, I think, drive, but certainly first quarter, when he got hurt, I remember because he was my start of the week that week. Elijah Mitchell, his rookie campaign, he averaged 15 PPR points per game, and then he just hasn't, ever gotten the chance. But when he's gotten opportunities, he's certainly looked the part. But is that looking the part in San Francisco and just being, hey, it's the next man up, or can he actually do that on another team? I think the positive is the landing spot. So Pacheco, will he regain his explosiveness? Because when he came back in week 13 after the broken leg from week 2, he just was clearly not the same guy. And the Chiefs went with Kareem Hunt at his age. And so I think he offers an upgrade over Hunt just in terms of what he can do from an explosive standpoint. Will he be as serviceable and stay healthy? So if they go into the season with, a backfield trio of Pacheco, Mitchell, and Carson Strong, then it's a great situation for Mitchell and probably a great situation for Pacheco. They're telling us that they feel pretty confident that he can regain his form. I wouldn't be surprised if they still had somebody else. Like you said, it's a 1-year, $3 million deal for Javonte Williams. It's like $3.5 million on a 1-year deal for Elijah Mitchell. That's nothing, so can still draft a guy, can still sign somebody else. Wouldn't be surprising if the Chiefs backfield is still not completely done.
Moving over to the wide receiver position, I get really sad when I think about DK Metcalf going to the Pittsburgh Steelers and signing a 5-year contract. It's great for him, lots of money, but he did actually fall in my dynasty rankings, and it's rare for a wide receiver in his mid-20s to get a long extension for that type of money and go down. But after what we've seen the last couple of years from DK and now going to an Arthur Smith offense on a team that doesn't have a quarterback, Jamie, do we ever see another wide receiver 1 season from DK Metcalf?
Probably not, unless they end up with a quarterback in their, they finally hit on somebody in the draft or trade for somebody. But I mean, you think about the guys that they're considering right now: 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers, bringing back a 37-year-old Russell Wilson. They're not going to be high enough in the draft unless they make a blockbuster trade to go get a Cam Ward or a Shedeur Sanders. So I was, not to go on a tangent, but between DK Metcalf and Juju Smith-Schuster, has there been anybody that has been on the cusp of being like a top 3 or actually a top 3 to 5 dynasty receiver that has just never materialized to living up to the potential of these 2 guys?
I shouldn't even say it, but I kind of want to say it, and we're going to talk about him after the second break. But is Garrett Wilson on that path?
Oh yeah, maybe. But yeah,
but DK, Juju had a 1,400 yard season. DK was close to that, 1,300 yards in 2020.
Right.
So I feel you, Jamie. The trajectory looked amazing for Metcalf. If I were going to make a case for him to be a wide receiver 1, it would be a McLaurin type season where because that's kind of who I compare him to right now. He's number 2, borderline 2-3 receiver every year, pretty much. Last year was disappointing. If he does have a year where he just catches a lot of touchdowns, that's the path. But no, I don't really see him being wide receiver.
There are a lot of wide receivers who have that path. If I go score 12 touchdowns, I could.
Yeah, but I can see it with Metcalf because he's always getting end zone targets.
Right.
Yeah, but sorry to cut you off, Jamie.
No. I mean, it's. I agree. I don't see it. It's just not. Doesn't seem feasible with what they're looking at in terms of who they're signing. Now, Rodgers obviously was great for Davante Adams in the short span of just the recent tenure with those 2 guys together with the Jets. So he can have that. It wouldn't surprise me if he has a 10 touchdown season, but it's got to be a lot of touchdowns. And Arthur Smith's system in that weather, in that environment, against the defenses that they're going to be facing, no, I don't think so.
Adam, Davante Adams is closer to DK in my dynasty rankings than I'm comfortable with because he's 32 years old. And that age is terrifying for wide receivers. But we talked about it yesterday. I'm pretty optimistic about the situation there in Los Angeles. At least this year, he's going to have a good quarterback. The Rams, clearly, as close as they are to Cooper Kupp, view Davante Adams as a significant upgrade, or they wouldn't have given Adams all this money and paid Kupp to go away like we think they're getting ready to. Is there any wide receiver over 30 that you would rather trade for as a contender than Davante Adams?
Over 30.
Over 30.
How old's Tyreek Hill?
31.
I think he will be 31.
He just turned 31 March 1st. Tyreek Hill, I'm fairly high on. I do think most of his struggles were injury related last year. He came into the season injured and got re-injured when he got arrested. So Tyreek Hill would be the answer there. Other than that, no, I can't think of anyone. I think I'd have to put Evans ahead of Adams. They're both 32. I would have to put Evans ahead of Adams. Yeah.
So Jamie, you have taken the mantle over the last 15 months of the ageist of the show. And I know that in redraft, you've been down on these guys. What is it? You've got a team that's a true contender. What's the most you give up for a guy like Adams?
True contender?
Yeah.
Late first. I mean, I think he can still give you top 20 production. I mean, like you said, this was the perfect landing spot for him. You know, he's going to a situation. He doesn't have to be the guy. He's got a great coach, great play caller. Role is there. Concentrated targets are there. You know, so it's as good a situation as you could ask for. But I got to be like my team is you know, we start 3 receivers and 2 flexes, and this is, you know, a must start player. Like I give you an example. I had in your dynasty league, 14-team league, I traded Ricky Pearsall for Stephon Diggs. So a very similar situation. You know, Pearsall was, I think I had the 12th pick. I took him 12th out of 14th last year in the rookie draft. We were 4 or 5 games into the season. I didn't like, because I had a bunch of injuries. I had McCaffrey and whatever. And so I was like, I need to sort of stable my lineup here. And I don't know if Pearsall's ever going to become superstar. Let me go get Stephon Diggs on a rental. He was looking good with the Texans. So it's a very similar situation. I think if you feel pretty confident in your roster, you should give up a late first for Davante Adams. I mean, ideally, you'd try to give up a second. I think he's definitely worth that. But if you feel like your team is a player away, yeah, like he's not. I don't think he's more than at best 15, 16 PPR points per game. That's still pretty good. You know, so you go get that if you need.
Very good. I think just want to say, like, just to clarify, you obviously are going to have to pay more for Tyreek Hill than Davante Adams. You probably have to pay more for Mike Evans than Davante Adams. The best value might be Davante Adams, but I still like Hill and Evans better.
And I will say, like, in my dynasty rankings right now, it's Hill just not ahead of Davante Adams by much at all. I view them pretty much the same, with Evans behind those guys. So but I think perception-wise, you're right.
And just one more thing of potential, you know, if you're playing this out, and you can say the same thing about Stafford, who's battled back injuries. Puka's injury history in college, not good. Missed 6 games last year, 5 games last year with a knee injury. If he misses time, we know what Stafford does with one guy. Like he took the Rams to a Super Bowl with Cooper Kupp having one of the best seasons ever for a wide receiver, triple crown winner that year. He was, you know, 11 to 14 targets per game for Puka Nacua down the stretch last year when Cooper Kupp was struggling. Like, he can make Davante Adams still very relevant even at his age if Puka misses any time.
I will say, with Adams and trading for him in Dynasty right now, this is the type of guy to where, leading up to the draft, when picks get a little bit more valuable, I'd probably be more willing. I'd be great with trading an early second. If I'm going to trade a first, I'm probably going to wait until September and make sure Davante Adams is still healthy, and then just trade next year's first, so it's not losing something that would help me win this year. But yeah, try to see if you can get him for a second right now. If you can't, and he's still good to go at the start of the year, I think I'm one of the best teams in the league. I'd give up that 2026 first. We got one more wide receiver to talk about. Christian Kirk goes to the Texans, up from wide receiver 62 to wide receiver 49. Is he anything more, Adam, than just wide receiver 4 with wide receiver 3 upside at this point?
Yeah, I think in full PPR, he's a wide receiver 3 with wide receiver 20 overall upside. I do think he could have that kind of season. But I mostly agree with you. I don't expect more than like a top 30 finish for Christian Kirk. You talked about Najee Harris. We know who he is. I think we know what Christian Kirk is. He's in the slot. He's going to have to rely a lot on catches. He's not going to score a ton of touchdowns. But I really like this for Stroud. I like this for the Texans. It's a good real life trade for them. I don't know if it's a huge needle mover for fantasy.
Let's take our second break. When we come back, we'll talk about some of the guys who were impacted by these moves.
Who's in? Who's out? Let the madness begin. The NCAA Men's Basketball Championship Selection Show on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
So, Jamie, I mentioned a lot of young quarterbacks when we were talking about Justin Fields, Anthony Richardson, all those guys. And one name I didn't mention was JJ McCarthy, because I do have him ranked slightly behind that group. But I think it's been a pretty good week for JJ McCarthy. Sam Darnold's not coming back. Daniel Jones isn't coming back. Maybe they go trade for or sign Rodgers, but man, I hope not for Minnesota Vikings fans. Does JJ McCarthy have a chance to jump into that high-end QB2, low-end QB1 conversation?
For sure. Especially when you mentioned Drake May, that was a big conversation, right? Going into last year's rookie drafts was, May and his upside versus McCarthy and his landing spot. And I think, if you're in the McCarthy camp, if you were in the McCarthy camp prior to that, and then you just watch what Sam Darnold did, like, oh my God, how are you not excited? And he did that with not 100% of TJ Hawkinson, so getting a, offensive line, hopefully, with Christian Darrisaw back and if he's ready to go with the system, play caller, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, like, yeah, he's got the opportunity here to be, superstar, if things go right. Cause I think he was not a better prospect than Sam Darnold, but at least at this point in their careers, better opportunity to, take a step forward. So it's an unbelievable setup for him. So yes, he belongs in that top 15 range if you buy into him being healthy and being ready to go.
Adam, I got a lot of questions yesterday about dynasty value for Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson and how much Justin Fields crushed them. And we talked about how, we were down on Garrett Wilson and Hall in redraft, but it's probably just 1 year for Fields as the starter, right? I haven't dropped Hall that much in the dynasty rankings. He's still a top 6 dynasty running back for me. Wilson's fallen a little bit more, but that kind of happened before Fields was added. He's wide receiver 16 in dynasty. How worried are you that we just never really get what we thought we were going to get from these two players?
I'm fairly worried. Well, when you talk about what we thought we were going to get, they were both first round picks in a lot of leagues, right? Like, right. Hall was obviously a top 5 pick, and Garrett Wilson, I'm guessing his ADP was in the second round, but early in the second round. Look, I think the fact that he gets Justin Fields, that's a downgrade, but the fact that he doesn't have Davante Adams, that's a huge upgrade. He was on pace for 190 targets before the Adams trade. He was on pace for 134 targets after the Adams trade. I think 134 targets is pretty realistic in 17 games with Justin Fields. So what was he in that stretch? He wasn't that good, unfortunately. He was wide receiver 26 per game, but I don't see any reason why that can't be more like wide receiver 18 per game. Just needs to do a little bit better with the targets. So I am worried about it for both of them. I'm probably a little bit more worried about Breece Hall, honestly. I think Wilson can still be like a must-start wide receiver. Hall, I don't know. He hasn't really shown that form since that rookie year. He hasn't really shown anything close to it. So we will see. I don't. That could go either way. I don't have a strong sense of where that's going with Breece Hall.
What was the projected pace for targets for Wilson?
Yeah, with before Adams, 190.
No, the second one,
134.
So DJ Moore's season with Justin Fields was 136 targets.
Right.
And so, if you're looking at, and again, there were some Bajent games in there, but if you're looking at it for what Justin Fields did with basically one wide receiver, and it was DJ Moore's best season. Hopefully, again, you're taking the most optimistic view here because we didn't see it with Fields with Pickens in the 6-game sample size. But hopefully that's the case. Is that, and let's not forget, this is a coaching staff coming from Detroit. They're hopefully going to, that I forget Erkstat, whatever I pronounce Tanner's last name, the offense coordinator for the Jets. I'm always butchering names, so I won't attempt anymore. But in any event, the offense coordinator for the Jets, hopefully he does some things to just be creative and give some easy throws to Garrett Wilson, and then we see maybe an Amon-Ra St. Brown type touchdown season or some big play potential from Jameson Williams, because I think Garrett Wilson could do both. It's funny you mentioned the target pace. You know that Garrett Wilson had a 23 target game in the start of the season without Davante Adams there, which is just absurd. But in any event, I think to me Wilson's kind of like a hold, of not maybe moving up because Adams is gone, but not necessarily moving back too far. Like I have him in one dynasty league. I'm pretty okay with it. I don't know if he'll be the flop of what Juju was or Metcalf was when we had expectations for them. Not those guys were terrible, but you get the point. And he may not ascend to the heights of what he can be, at least just yet. The Breece Hall situation is interesting because I think you're referring to his second season, Adam, his rookie season when he tore his ACL. Second season when he had all the reception. Like, that's not going to happen with Justin Fields. Can he be a 40-catch guy? I think so. I don't think he's going to be a 70-catch guy. He was on pace for that before Adams joined the team, at least a 60-catch pace before Adams joined the team. But if he catches 40 passes, the nice thing about running quarterbacks is they open up running lanes. And so I still think he's an explosive rusher. You mentioned it before when we were talking about Fields that the offensive line is not great. Hopefully they get Vera Tucker back. They get some pieces in the draft or still fill out some spots here, that it can be serviceable enough that while Breece Hall is not going to live up to what we thought coming off that second season, he's still an explosive enough rusher, and maybe the offense is better that he scores some more rushing touchdowns. Again, you're taking some leaps here with it, but if I'm a contending team right now in Dynasty and I have Breece Hall and I'm looking at maybe a non-contending team that has Derrick Henry, I may try and make a trade. Okay, let me get Derrick Henry for the 1-year situation if I think he's better than Breece Hall and try and win. And maybe the team that's not contending is looking at maybe Breece Hall in 2 years, if the quarterback situation is better, he can get back to being that elite level prospect.
I'm going to do that rankings thing to you again, Adam. Rank Garrett Wilson, Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, and Rome Odunze in Dynasty.
Oh, man. Ooh, that is tough. I will go.
Like, those are some really good names, and none of those 4 right now are in my top 15 wide receivers.
Geez, this is really hard. I'm going to take Garrett Wilson 1. I mean, I can't put Odunze 2. He hasn't done anything that has to matter. I know he's only played 1 year, and I could see him being the best, but I have to put him 4. I'm going to go Worthy. I'm going to go Wilson, Worthy, Rice, Odunze.
Same.
Wilson, Worthy, Rice, Odunze. Okay.
Jamie says the same. What about you, Heath?
No, I think I have it Worthy, Rice, Wilson, Odunze, but they're back to back to back to back. Like, when I ask those questions, it's almost always that I really am unsure, and I'm hoping that somebody will make a case that helps me to decide.
And I think your rankings were Worthy, Rice, Marquise Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster.
No. He did have Justin Watson ahead of those guys, but since he left the Chiefs,
Justin Watson was really helpful. George Pickens.
You can't start giving Dave bear down jokes and we don't give you.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, I'm not trying to hide it. Dave's always trying to conceal it. George Pickens, big loser with DK Metcalf coming to Pittsburgh, unless he's getting traded somewhere else that will actually make him happy. Jamie, would you rather have Pickens or DK on your dynasty roster right now?
Right now, I'd rather have DK. But if he, let's say, gets to New England, that might change, just because of, age. But I could see Pickens out of the league in 2 years. It's not that crazy, just given his attitude and how teams may just get tired of him. Look, he's got the ability to be explosive. You look at those first 6 games with Russell Wilson, and finally a competent quarterback, and he was doing the things we were hoping he was capable of doing. That we saw some flashes the year before, and hopefully he ends up in that type of situation. But he's got to leave Pittsburgh at this point. If he stays with the Steelers and plays out his rookie deal, and Metcalf's there, they're clones of each other, and Metcalf just got paid to be the quote unquote alpha of that receiving core.
Yeah, Adam, I think that contract is the point, because like Pickens, as you mentioned yesterday, has been really similar to DK Metcalf over the last couple of years in terms of actual production. Pickens is 3 years younger than DK Metcalf. Is the contract enough to make up for those points?
If he stays with Pittsburgh, yeah. But I think It would be so weird if they got Aaron Rodgers, because Jamie mentioned Metcalf and Pickens are clones. These are guys that you really need to use downfield. And Rodgers, that's just not what he does now. He's gets the ball out really quickly, and he throws short passes. He had one of the lowest ADOTs in the NFL. We can react to that if that actually happens, but like that would not be good for either of them, I don't think. But I actually do think if Pickens got traded to a spot like New England, where he's with a strong arm quarterback that could use his potential a bit more and wasn't on an Arthur Smith offense that's not going to throw the ball much. They were toward the bottom in pass attempts. Then yeah, I could see him being better than Metcalf. But right now I'd rather have DK Metcalf because yeah, it just seems like there are non-football things that are holding George Pickens back.
Unfortunately, that does seem to be the case. Hopefully, maybe you can go buy low on George Pickens right now. He gets moved and everything turns out better. Although I hear like New England, that'd be pretty awesome if he and Drake May could get on the same page. There could be some good landing spots for George Pickens. There's some teams that need wide receivers, and it's a pretty terrible both free agent class and rookie class, I'm afraid. Maybe terrible is too far on the rookies. That's going to do it for today's FFT Dynasty. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Thomas, for running the show. Thank you to everybody in the chat, but especially for Matthew Williams, who says Heath Cummings is no Adam Azer. That's for sure. And I thank you. I appreciate it, Matthew. We will talk to you on Friday with Davis Maddock.